This is a novel. It is entitled The Business Army, and I bound these copies. However, it has been published. It was published a year ago in the online magazine Eclectica, a very good magazine, by the way, edited by Tom Dooley. And I actually have two different versions of the novel. The one that you can find online is written as a conventional text-only novel. But this printed version is what I call a screenplay novel. And it comes with quite a bit of artwork in it, as well as archival photographs from the period, from the 1930s, in which the novel is set. Now, the reason that I did this was because I wanted to create the sense of a movie, but keep also the sort of deeper, more intricate plot and narrative and character development of a traditional novel. And so I ended up creating this sort of hybrid form. It's a little bit like a graphic novel because of all the art in it, but at the same time, it is it's a novel. And this particular work is set in the 1930s. I'm just going to first read from the introduction. I have written a novel entitled The Business Army. It is based on little known but fascinating historical fact. Soon after his election in 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt began what is commonly known as the 100 Days, a period of progressive legislation urgently required in America as the banking system was on the verge of collapse. However, through the summer and autumn months of 1933, there were powerful forces in America which did not want Roosevelt to, quote, go too far, unquote. These interests included the Morgan family, the DuPonts, and even those of Prescott Bush, paterfamilias, to a political business family well known in the contemporary world. The Business Army is a riveting story about how these interests reacted to Roosevelt's progressive legislation. It also describes an historically documented attempt to organize a coup d'etat against FDR's administration. The Business Army goes to the very heart of one of the most overlooked episodes of 20th century American history, yet its plot is based on historical fact. In the summer of 1932, a large group of impoverished World War veterans assembled in Washington to form what was called the Bonus Army. Their demand was simple. Because of the Depression, they wished to cash in early bonus certificates they had received after their war service. But the administration of Herbert Hoover was adamant it would not yield to such a costly proposal, and under the leadership of Douglas MacArthur, it crushed the Bonus Army. The resulting political fallout sealed the fate of the Hoover administration and was pivotal in bringing about the election of a controversial reformer, Franklin D. Roosevelt. Hoover's actions also had the more subtle effect, though, of altering the mentality of many veterans. They did not now see the government as their friend, but as an opponent which was insensitive to their concerns. In 1933, two members of the American Legion named Gerald McGuire and Bill Doyle approached General Smedley Butler with a proposal. They wanted Butler to attend a Legion convention and take a stand in favor of the gold standard. Butler, who routinely accepted visits by veterans, nevertheless regarded the proposal of McGuire and Doyle with skepticism. How did he fit into Legion politics? He was not a delegate to the convention. Doyle and McGuire did not give up, however. McGuire proved especially tenacious. As time went by, the plans of Gerald McGuire became increasingly militant. Now, not only did he want Butler to speak in favor of the gold standard, but he wanted him to also play the role of, quote, the man on the white horse, unquote, a Mussolini-like figure who would lead a march of veterans on Washington and usurp Roosevelt by becoming a kind of super secretary to the president. Butler kept leading McGuire along, trying to find out more and understand the real workings of McGuire's group. He was playing the role of private investigator, eager to find out who the quote-unquote top people in McGuire's organization really were. When McGuire and Butler had their last, most heated discussion at a hotel in Philadelphia in 1934, Butler contacted a journalist friend named Paul Comely French in order to have French also talk to McGuire and act as a witness to McGuire's traitorous scheme. French did so, and once this happened, Butler went to the federal government's investigatory body, the House of Un-American Activities Committee. But once Butler began testifying, he realized that there were powers that, while willing to thoroughly investigate the dealings of one Gerald C. McGuire, were reluctant to go much higher than that. Butler realized that in politics, too, there are untouchables. Finally, the business army is not only historically significant, but significant in the present day. As corporate power keeps growing, the question of how much influence it has over democracy is an issue of an importance not just to readers interested in American history, but all readers concerned about the maintenance of genuine liberty. So that's the introduction. Now, as I said, the version that's online at Eclectica is written in the form of a traditional novel. It's stylistically somewhat different from this screenplay novel version. That's what I call these things, screenplay novels. Not a screenplay, not a novel, but a hyphen between the two nouns. So I'll start. Fade in, exterior, a major thoroughfare, day. Title, July 28th, 1932, Washington. SFX, the excited whinny of horses rearing, the screams of people beneath their spinning hooves. The camera shakes. A crowd is being broken up by mounted policemen. A battalion of soldiers appears in the background. Cut to the rear of this chaos, next to some parked cars and a picket fence. General Douglas MacArthur, commanding officer of the operation, is elegantly dressed in his cavalry uniform. He looks on attentively. MacArthur to a captain. You there! Why aren't those troops moving faster? Captain. They're going as fast as they safely can. MacArthur. Sharply. Don't make them go safely. Make them go. Cut to a crowd of civilians in the path of the mounted policemen, and in the background a troop of cavalry soldiers, people's voices off screen. A woman's scream, a man chanting, bonus, bonus. Civilian man to troops. You brutes, can't you see there are women and children here? Officer. Move on, you people, move on. Remember, you were in uniform once. Do what you're told. It's for the best. A man in the background advances until we can see him clearly. He has the hungry, alert look of one who would be either categorized as a troublemaker or hero, depending on one's allegiances. Man. The hell will take orders from the likes of you? You're just a pawn. Don't you feel any shame? There are veterans here who can barely feed their families. Why don't you think of justice first before you start lecturing others on their duty? Cut to long shot of the street on which the protesters and troops are confronting each other. SFX, the sharp whistle of other, more aggressive cavalry moving forward, and then also advancing a column of tanks. In the midst of this is the figure of George S. Patton. He surveys the crowd for a few moments. Patton, squinting. Charge. Cut to close-up of the crowd, more screaming, pushing, and shoving. SFX, 1, then 2 shots. Voice hysterically, Jesus, Lord Jesus! SFX, the sound of a melee fighting. Fade. Exterior, the inaugural rostrum, constructed in front of the Capitol building. Title, the first inauguration of Franklin D. Roosevelt, March the 4th, 1933. A medium shot of Roosevelt as he walks up a specially constructed ramp to the podium. one of his sons at his side. To an uninformed observer, he simply looks like a man walking with stiff-gaited dignity. To another more knowledgeable about his condition, he has the profoundly determined look of someone whose body has ceased functioning in what we consider a normal fashion and who now strains mightily to compensate for that fact. Roosevelt reaches the podium, stops for a brief moment to compose himself, and observes the audience. SFX, polite applause. Roosevelt: I am certain that my fellow Americans expect on my induction into the presidency I will address them with a candor and a decision which the present situation of our people impel. This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. Cut to exterior, the audience. A man in a top hat looks at Roosevelt impassively. His wife, a portly woman with what seems at first to be a rather stolid face, but upon closer inspection turns out to have kind eyes, regards FDR with a hopeful, generous smile. Roosevelt continuing: In such a spirit on my part and on yours we face our common difficulties. They concern, thank God, only material things. Values have shrunken to fantastic levels. Taxes have risen. Our ability to pay has fallen. Government of all kinds is faced by serious curtailment of income. The means of exchange are frozen in the currents of trade. The withered leaves of industrial enterprise lie on every side. Farmers find no markets for their produce. The savings of many years and thousands of families are gone. Pan across the audience. A man is standing in the crowd, younger than the couple in the stands. He is also with his wife and also his infant son, who his wife coddles. The man looks at FDR with what can only be described as rapt wonder. And beside this family still is an older man with a skeptical expression bordering on sourness. Cut to a close-up of FDR continuing, the cadence of his voice becoming more musical, more inspiring. Roosevelt continuing: Yet our distress comes from no failure of substance. We are stricken by no plague of locusts. Compared with the perils which our forefathers conquered because they believed and were not afraid, we have still much to be thankful for. Nature still offers her bounty, and human efforts have multiplied it. Plenty is at our doorstep, but a generous use of it languishes in the very sight of the supply. Primarily, this is because the rulers of the exchange of mankind's goods have failed through their own stubbornness and their own incompetence, have admitted their failure and abdicated. Practices of the unscrupulous money changers stand indicted in the court of public opinion, rejected by the hearts and minds of men. Cut to interior, the smoking room of a country club. A sizable radio is by a bookcase. A group of men in particularly well-tailored clothes stand listening to FDR. Roosevelt continuing on the radio: The money changers have fled from their high seats in the temple of our civilization. We may now restore that temple to the ancient truths. The measure of the restoration lies in the extent to which we apply social values more noble than mere monetary profit. First man, venomously: Listen to that! Second man: It's a typical political speech. First man: Typical? Just listen to him. He's preaching class hatred. Second man: Have a drink, DuPont. Words are just words. Actions are something else altogether. Let's see what the fellow tries to get up to before getting emotional about it all. First man, DuPont, to a third man sitting comfortably in a chair: Morgan, you have some sense. Is this rabble-rousing or is it not? And is it not the speech of a rabble-rouser that acts to ignite trouble? Morgan, wryly: You're the chemicals man, DuPont. You tell me what can cause an ignition or not. All, including to a partial degree DuPont, laugh.